For those listening on any other platform, if you're not on Fireside, we are live on Fireside, and we're just going to give the room a minute or two to fill up before we bring our guest up. All right, let's get rid of that wait bot. Here we go. I'm going to bring our guest up for today. Okay, here we go. And there we go. He's coming up. Here we go, Mr. John Shea.
How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you.
Excellent. Let me quickly preface the show. Welcome to the Rocstedi Podcast, episode, 47? I think I've got 27. It's 47 with John Red Shea, who's a Southie Boston mobster, ex-mobster, I should say. And today we're going to go a little bit into his life and how he's really turned his life around from his past to where he currently is today. So if anyone's listening on another platform, we're streaming live across from Fireside over to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Rumble, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can also catch the replay on any of the podcast platforms without the visuals. Welcome to the show.
Say that again, Rock. It's on what?
It's on Fireside, YouTube.
Fireside, YouTube. It's on Fireside and YouTube.
Yeah. Fireside, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Rumble,
Twitch,
Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Rumble.
Yeah, there might be a couple. I've just set them all up, so there might be a couple that might not come through for whatever reason. We're just getting them fixed, but I think it should all be coming through now.
Awesome.
So we can catch them. So welcome to the show, man. I reached out to you just not long ago, and we seem to be able to jump on a phone call and talk really easy for a long time. And the sort of preface of my shows is that I don't want to know too much about my guest, a little bit, right? Because I want to ask those legitimate questions and find out for real for the first time. So as we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, and we're getting into little bits and pieces, I'm thinking, no, I don't want to hear it yet, but I do want to hear it now. And so it's like I want to save it for the show. So we're going to see how we go with that. But sorry, just getting messages coming through. So if anyone wants to leave a message through this show, there's the clickable link here on Fireside through the fortune cookie. It'll click and go straight to my Instagram. You can leave a voicemail for John, and we'll play that during the show if you have a question for him. Also, if John has written a book called Rat Bastards, and I say that with the Boston accent, Rat Bastards. And
Rat Bastards.
There you go, Rat Bastards. And that's a book that he's written. He's written a couple of books, but that's the clickable link to purchasing his book, which we will talk about through the show. So,
which is became, as you can see, a New York Times bestseller.
Yes, exactly.
I'm very proud of that.
You should be. Absolutely to be a bestseller.
It's not every day you get to become a New York Times bestseller.
Absolutely. So, and we can call you Red, right? Red is your nickname.
Yeah, of course. Red, my nickname. Yes.
Okay. Red, just to sort of give the folks an understanding who don't know who you are, I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to the start of your life, maybe a bit through your childhood and work through towards current day. So if we can take the steps from that, where you were born, what life was like for you as a kid, what your parents were like.
Sure. So I grew up in South Boston, Massachusetts, and the nickname for South Boston is Southie. And it had been the biggest Irish enclave in Boston, if you will. And it's a unique enclave at the time because the people that grew up there were, politicians, lawyers, and gangsters, if you will, and good working, hard working people. But you always had that underlying um, part of Southie where you know, you had that underworld, if you will, because that part of Southie, um, you didn't, they weren't as fortunate financially as other parts of Southie. And Southie's not huge, but it's big for Boston. So that said, unfortunately, I came from a family, a broken father, no father at home. He died when I was 9 years of age. I didn't know my dad. Um, uh, totally Irish. Um, and I eventually grew up in the projects in Southie. And the projects in Southie was predominantly Irish, just like the town itself. And if you didn't know how to fight, if you didn't know how to defend yourself, it could be it could be a tough place for a young individual to grow up in without being able to defend themselves. But that said, again, getting back to the politicians, I mean, politicians from Southie, they ruled the city, if you will, at one time in Boston. They whatever Southie needed, they got, and whatever Southie people needed, and they went to their local politician, they were helped out a lot also.
John, I just want to stop there and go back a little bit back to the childhood for a second. I'm just trying to paint a picture in my mind about what the scene was like, what the neighborhood was like, because it would sound like people weren't as well off there, like you mentioned, in the projects. So the culture was a bit more fend for yourself, fight like you said. So there's a lot of kids that probably didn't really stand much of a chance with the influence like that, and then combined with the death of your father, maybe not having that male influence did lead you down a particular track, right? Was there any sort of?
I don't like to hang my hat on that because, I don't want to blame, not having a father at home, but at some point, yes, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, if you have a dad at home, it and a good dad, that is, um, that could be a big influence in helping a young child out. You're absolutely
Did
right
you have
about
any
that.
sort of male role model to look up to at the young age when you were looking for guidance or anything like that?
I did not. The only male guidance I got was from the local boxing gym when I started boxing at such a young age, and most of those guys were tough guys, and they were connected to the underworld.
Tell us a bit about how old you were when you started boxing and what that gave to you, what you thought was missing in your life, because that's a big part of your life, the boxing, and that's a part of you, right? So tell us about how you got
Right.
into that and what evolved from there.
So you can say boxing started everything off for me at such a young age. I was beat up at the age of 5 by two older kids. And when I mean older, I mean in their early teens, if you will. And they had me,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And they had me stuck in the gutter and in the gutter of the street. And there was running water and I was being soaked by the running water. And they were spitting on me and beating me up at such a young age. I was a little tyrant myself, even at the young age of 5, if you will. But they both beat me up, and I ran home crying. And my older sister, which is the youngest of my sisters, um, came out and she said, "What the hell happened?" And I was such an enraged. She came out with me, and she actually went in and to the house and started beating beating one of the guys. One guy ran off and she started beating the other guy up with the coat rack in from the house that he lived in. She went right into the house and started beating them up. And after that, she took me by the hand and she said, "You're going to learn how to box." And she was the one who took me to the gym to learn how to box and influenced me for boxing at that early age, which I was totally grateful for. But at the same time, when I went to the gym and stuff, as time went on, I started meeting the older guys there, and the influence started with the underworld.
Okay, so that's going to spiral to one particular story, I'm sure, one track. But just to keep it at the young age for a moment more, is what was school like for you when
Oh,
you were at school?
school!
Was it, you get
I
along
was
with people
actually
easy, or
I was actually a great student, but unfortunately, in my time of growing up in Boston, we grew up in a racial era that there was a lot of racial problems that were happening in Boston at the time. And it was during what they call, and people in your viewers can Google this and look at it. It was called forced busing, and that was where they took black kids into they bust them into white neighborhoods like my town, the Irish town, white Irish town, and they mixed the two together, and vice versa, the white kids into the black neighborhood. So at that time, because it was back in the day, if you will, we were all used to having our own enclaves, if you will. You had the white enclave, you had the black enclave, you had the Irish enclave, you had the Italian, you had Polish enclaves, you had all different ethnicities. Today, it's all melded together. It's not quite the same anymore. So that said, I grew up in an era where there was a transition that happened, and it wasn't an easy transition by any means. And so I went to school and I was a great student until what they call forced busing happened. And then I was not a good student because there was so much chaos and so much rioting that had happened during those days, which was very unfortunate. And but I happened to live that, and I happened to see that history, and not many people can say that, if you will. But that said, I was an excellent student until then. And then, of course, you know, schooling and distractions and stuff like that took me to another course.
okay, and just thinking about your mother, she's now a widow while she's got children. What was life like for her having to raise
Yeah,
kids without her husband around?
it was really tough for my mom. My mom, she wasn't educated by any means, and her parents, her parents were dead. Um, she was age of 13 and they were both dead, her parents. So she grew up really, really tough herself. And she grew up a tough life. And she wasn't really educated at all, but she was smart. Don't get me wrong, she was smart, but she was not academically educated. And that said, um, you know, she was limited. She was limited to what jobs she could get and how much money she could make, even back then. And so, which she found her niche, and her niche was, cleaning office buildings in the evening when people weren't in the office buildings, or cleaning people's homes that had money, and and she cleaned. She was a housekeeper in a nursing home for over 20 some odd years, where it was actually a great nursing home in Southie, if you will. And it was ran by Carmelite nuns. And she actually ended up there in her age, and she ended up passing away at that place also.
At an older age?
Yes, at the age of 87, actually.
Okay. And I'm just curious, how many siblings do you have? You have an older sister or sisters, you said. Were there a
So
few kids in the family? Were they a lot older than you?
I am the baby of the family,
Okay.
and I'm the only boy. So I grew up with all
Okay.
sisters. So needless to say, how tough that was for for the only boy, and how, especially with one bathroom.
Sure, sure. But it's the reason I asked the question is that you still didn't have any like older brothers to even give you some sort of guidance either. It was all
I
females
had
in
a
your life, no real
I
male. Yeah,
other than other than my sister fighting that
boxing
one
gym.
battle, other than my sister fighting that one battle when I was 5 years of age, I fought every battle my own self. Every battle that you can ever think of, I fought it, from the streets all the way into to the uh, to the mob world, to prison.
Okay, so let's go back on to the boxing a little bit. So I can imagine now that you're getting that kind of reassurance from the boys at the gym, right? The older guys are taking to you, and you're feeling like part of the crew. Like you want to make them proud in a way, I'm sure. So how did things start to develop with your
So
boxing and them that started to lead down that sort of
So
life?
at such a young age, beginning at 5, I grew into boxing. I found a niche for myself. I found a sport that I could relate to, because I was an angry young man. I'll be honest with you. I just, I didn't have a dad at home, being told what to do by a strict mother, of course, and she had to be the father figure at the same time, and it was very stressful. And those times, you didn't get a lot of leeway from your parents, or your mom or your dad, even if you had a dad, you didn't get a lot of leeway like you do today by any means. You didn't get a lot of understanding. It was either this way or no way. So that said, there was a lot of head uh, banging going on, if you would. And that said, you know, I wasn't someone who took easily to this is the way it is and that's the way you got to do it. I just wasn't that way. I always had to do the opposite way, if you
Sure.
will. The stubbornness in me.
So back at the
So,
gym, you're
so,
training and getting stuff out of it, yeah?
so, yeah. So training and fighting. I used to get my ass kicked all the time when I was young. Because it was new to me, but I caught on really quickly, and I was able to. Once I caught on quickly, I was able to start conquering the same people, the same size as me, and stuff like that, without fighting someone, or even the same age, if you will. And I was conquering quickly, and eventually, it took a little while with some guys because they were much more advanced than I was, because they were taught by their father or someone like that, and they were in it much longer than I was. But in the end, eventually, I surpassed them. And, I used to get my ass kicked by them, but eventually I started kicking their ass.
Would it be fair to say that when you got your ass kicked, that would have taken away any fear of getting your ass kicked in future? Like there's no fear of pain or no fear of fighting, right? Like you're going in there fearless. Was that like a benefit?
Well, every fighter, as you know, I went all the way to professional. Um, every fighter, every fight that you fight, you always have some type of fear, no matter who you are. And if you don't have some type of fear, then there's something wrong, something badly wrong. Um, because with a little fear, it means that you want to win.
I like that. Okay, so how successful did your boxing career progress without jumping too far ahead in those years? Now, what sort of
So,
age were you as well when you started, and as it progressed as well? Give me a timeline for that.
so as I started at such a young age, and then I progressed, and I would win like during that time when I was so young, I won what they call the Salty Baby Golden Gloves. And I won that, and I won that numerous times, numerous times as I was a young boy. And then eventually I progressed into the juniors. And then from the juniors, I became
had a miscarriage between my two. My sister had two. One of my other
Sorry.
sisters had one.
Something came over there. Sorry.
So
Go ahead. Sorry.
from the that's okay. So from the juniors, I started fighting locally, and then it became regionally, and then it became nationally. And I started winning New England tournaments regionally as New England champion, open and stuff like that. And then eventually I probably had about, I want to say 80 or somewhere around there, 80 fights as a junior. And then I went into the amateurs from there. And the funny thing about the amateurs, I just saw it. We just had the amateur Golden Gloves here in New England, and Mike Tyson showed up. And it's funny because when I went from the juniors, I went right into the amateurs because I was such a good fighter and a champion in the juniors that I went in as an open class fighter. I never went in as a novice fighter. I went right into the opens. I went right into the fire. I went right for the top notch, and that's just the way I did it. Anyhow, I was
80
16.
fights is huge for a junior, right? That's a lot of fights.
Yeah, that
that's
was
a lot.
That's prior to the age of 16, by the way.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I went into the amateurs, and I went right into the open class status, and I ended up winning the Golden Gloves and going into the Tournament of Champions and all that. And I won the open class Golden Gloves a few years in a row. And it's funny because, as I was going to say, this past year at the Golden Gloves, they had Mike Tyson as a guest. And they had Mickey Ward, who I fought a couple of times in my lifetime. Mickey Ward is the guy who Mark Wahlberg made the movie after, The Fighter. And we're really good friends. We've known each other since the age of 13. So that said, he fought that year too. And they had a pamphlet saying, "Hey, do you recognize your name from the Tournament of Champions of this year?" And I opened it up, and I didn't know in the brochure that would be there. And I went, oh shit, this is my name. I said, that's awesome, right? I mean, history, right? And I'm going, oh, there I am there. And I won that year too. And not only did I win that year, but Mickey Ward won that year. And Mike Tyson fought that year also in New England, believe it or not. He came down from New York, and he won the New England Golden Gloves that year also. So yeah, there's a lot of history with me in boxing and stuff like that. And then eventually I turned professional. I went to California, but in the meantime, I was always still wheeling and dealing and trying to make a few bucks on the street to stay alive and keep my dream going, if you will.
Tell me a bit about that. That's a part I want to tie into the stream of your boxing with that life and how that progresses, because I'm sure it starts off kind of, like you said, trying to make a buck, and then it just grows from there. So, what were the first dealings that started to lead you down that track?
Well, the first dealings were selling marijuana in the projects, which today is, if you will, legal in most places, if you will, especially here in the United States. But that said, from dealing marijuana to hijacking stuff and off of trucks and stuff like that, trying to earn $1 most ways we could, and whether it was from jewelry or hijacking, or we just try to make money, and without really trying to hurt anybody at the same time.
How do you get from selling a bit of pot to hijacking trucks? Because that's a bit of a step. Did you start to get involved with mobsters at that time?
Well, not at that point, but eventually. You just go out with your friends and you start looking for scores, if you will, and looking for trucks that are available and that have things on it. And back then, it was much easier than it is now. I'll be honest with you. So I would be standing
Can
on
you
the
run me through one
corner.
of those situations, like what happened and
Yeah,
how you planned it? And
I would be standing on the corner in the projects near a store, and the guy in the truck would go into the store for a minute and leave the truck alone, and we'd open the back of the truck, and he'd have a big box of cigarettes, and we'd start swiping the boxes of cigarettes, and we'd take off with the cigarettes, and then he'd come out. Of course, the cigarettes are already gone, and we go back and we would resell those cigarettes back to the store, if you will, at our price.
right,
So
right.
I mean, that was just the
Those
beginning
claps
of
are
it.
those sound effects are people from the listeners that clap or they laugh or they do whatever. So that's where those sound effects come in on.
That was just the beginning of it, and then it progressed to bigger things, to from cigarettes to electronics, televisions at the time, if you will, and stuff like that.
Did you have your own crew of guys, which were your friends? Were you in a gang, or was it just buddies that looked out for each other at the time?
No, there was a few of us that ran out and did that. Yeah, that waited from the projects. Yep. And then there was certain groups, guys that did certain things of how much money they wanted to make. I didn't get extensive into it, but I went to at least up to the Jewy part of it, So, and the Jewy part of it was a little different. That was a little different. That was, you had to dress with a nice proper shirt on, and you go into the store and say, "Geez, can I take a look at that Rolex? That looks awesome. That looks beautiful." And the Rolex goes on your wrist, and have a nice
You go out
day.
the door. Okay.
I could run like a son of a gun. I could run like a son of a gun in those days.
Plus, you being a boxer, being fit as well, right?
Oh yeah. Not only that, not only that, but if you go out to dinner, I remember one time I went to Canada, okay, and me and my friends, and we were having a fun trip. We drove up in a nice car that I had, and we did some scores in Canada, if you will, Jewy scores. Geez, can I try that watch on out the door? But at the same time, I remember staying at the famous hotel in Quebec, right on the oh my God, the Chateau, oh my God, whatever. Anyway, it's right on the river, the I did believe it's Saint Elizabeth's River, whatever it is, and I had given my number to a few girls at the time up there, back home. But back then it didn't mean anything. Today it means something, you know. So I get home and my buddy goes, "What the hell did you do in Canada?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I got the Canadian people calling from the hotel that you owe the money." I said, "Oh, I forgot to pay the bill." I mean, it's just
so,
it was a lot of fun at that time, if you will.
Sure.
But these are the things that we did at that time.
Give me an idea of what age you were at that time doing the hijackings and jewelry robbery and things. Were you a teenager still, late teens?
I was still, I was late teens, 17 years of age. Yep.
Okay. And so you've been boxing for a while. Then at the time you've been boxing for several years, and your relationship's starting to form more with some mob guys around South Boston.
Yep. Oh yeah, I was already very good friends with them and hanging with them and running around with them and just hanging out with them and all that good stuff and watching them and watching what they did and how much money they made. And when I saw how much money they were making and what they had, I wanted the same thing too from a kid coming from the projects. Bottom line, I wanted that too.
So did you approach them or did they approach you with some initial gigs, I should say, some jobs?
Well, it was more like, if I wanted to, I could have it too. And so I was so focused though on boxing. I wanted to be a fighter more than anything, if you will. And so I went to California. Started my boxing career. I started in Los Angeles, and I was going to every gym that there was, and I had a manager out there that brought me out at the time, and he was bringing me to every gym in LA. And I was training and sparring with the best of the best in Los Angeles at such a young age. I was just about 18 at the time, and I was sparring world champions. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he was trying to sell pieces of me to spectators that were watching. And I had no contract with the man, but I know one thing, I wasn't, even at that age, I wasn't going to let anybody, use me. That's not the way it was going to happen. I would have did something legitimately, contractual wise, but nobody was going to abuse me. You're not going to buy everything. And then, when it comes time, fight time, I get screwed over, and I knew that at the time. As a matter of fact, that guy was forewarned before I left Boston not to do that to me. Believe it or not.
Why leave Boston to LA? Was that where there was more opportunity for
there was more
in the fight
opportunity.
scene?
There was more opportunity, but I'm going to tell you why. And the fact is like this: any great fighter that came from Boston, most fighters that came from Boston, that they did very well in their region, but once they stepped out of that region in New England, they didn't do well. I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to step out, way out, and do well, and then, because I knew what I could do back at home. I knew what I could do back in the region. Let me start somewhere else. Let me start from the beginning at the real deal. I don't want to go with the, work up to the real deal. No, I want to do the real deal. Because if I can't do the real deal now, I'm not going to be able to do the real deal later. And that's exactly what happened to those guys. And I didn't want to be one of those guys. I wanted to start off the right way. And I did. I was doing well. And he had people that wanted to invest and buy into the contracts and everything else. And I found out about this, unbeknownst to me, and I got away from the guy. And I ended up with a guy named Dennis Cardinelli, who actually is my attorney and attorney's brother at the time. And their father was a fight trainer and everything out of New York, and they loved boxing. And he said, "Hey, I got a guy here." He was trying to actually sell a piece of me to him. I wasn't up for that. I wanted someone that I could trust, that I could rely upon, and that I could work with, because I knew the ability that I had, and I just wanted the shot. That's all I needed. So we got together, and we had a pro fight and training, and my first pro fight, I knocked a guy out. I didn't even know who he was. There was a guy named Harry Kabikoff. He was the promoter, and his office was in the Red Fox's building in West Hollywood. And he was a pretty good character, funny character, this Harry Kabikoff. And I'm sure people who, back in the boxing world, back in the day, they know who Harry Kabikoff is. But that said, I had no idea who I was matched against. But I seen this guy across the ring from me that had a goatee that was come down like this, and he looked like the devil. And I said to myself, first of all, when they put the gloves on me, they 8-ounce professional boxing gloves, and your hands are wrapped like a cast. When they were doing this to me, I said to myself, it's the first time as a pro for me. I said to myself, holy shit. I said, somebody hits me, they'll kill me with these things on. I said, I said, wait a minute, I better get them before they get me. So that was my exactly. That was my mentality. Yeah, that was my mentality. And So the fight began, and I went up right after the guy. I didn't hold back. That's what type of fighter I am anyway. I don't hold back. I say, let's get it on. So I see what you get. I want to see what you have, and we'll take it from there. But that said, I went after the guy, and he had a little something with him. I stepped back very quickly, and this happened extremely fast. And I went straight to his body on him and up to his head with a left hook, and then I finished up from there. And I caught him with that left hook, because that's one of my favorite punches, if you will. And I had him in the perfect position, and I ended him in 1 minute and 37 seconds.
Right. Well, one thing I love about you, Red, is that you're so fucking confident at that age too. Just that part that you said that you've moved across to LA to be immersed in the pool of like the best of the best. Let's find out how much of a fucking man, how skilled I am right now, instead of working your way up and getting knocked out along the way. That's almost like wasted time in a way. I think you totally
exactly.
But not everyone's got the mentality. You did that because you were confident in your ability. Other people might feel confident, but it's just like you knew you had the gift, you knew you had the skills.
Yeah.
So I love that sort of mentality. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so you knocked this guy out. Then what happens from there?
So the second fight, I was my manager at the time. We had a little bit of a setback, and he couldn't be with me all the time, and that mentally, as a young guy, and giving my all to the sport and to him and to this endeavor, I was like, my head wasn't there.
How old were you then?
18.
18. And a question I wanted to ask just while you were speaking before, but I didn't want to cut you off, is at this age, who do you start to turn to for advice? There must be someone you could start to look up to by then. Did you have anybody yet that you could rely on?
I didn't
Nobody
have anybody.
Still? Okay.
No, I didn't have anybody. I just took the reins in my own hands. I took the bull in my own hands, and I tried my best.
Okay. So you felt let down, or that?
Yeah, my
they
mind
didn't
wasn't
follow through.
there. So I fought the second fight, and believe it or not, and it was at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, where they throw money into the ring and all that. And I started out very, very flat. And that's because my mind wasn't right, and it just wasn't there. I felt a lot of letdown, if you will.
You're already beaten before you got in the ring. That's a true thing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you know, as much confidence you have to have confidence in your corner. You have to have confidence in the people that are backing you up, if you will. Not necessarily that they need to be there, like, fighting for you, which not, but they need to be supporting you in a strong way. And I lost that support. I lost it, and unfortunately, and it wasn't because he was a bad guy or nothing like that. It was a family thing. It was a personal thing for him. So, and I understood that. And
did you understand it at the time or afterwards?
I did understand it at the time, but I was still let down. I felt really let down. I was like, fuck,
Yeah. So what effect did that have on you from that point forward?
I lost the fight by a decision. I started making a comeback in the fight. It ended up being a really good fight in the Olympic Auditorium. And after the fight, because it was such a good fight, they threw the money into the ring. And the winner gets the money. The winner of the fight gets the money. And he ended up winning, and he reaped the benefits of the earnings, which was rightfully so. But after that, I left California, and I went back to Boston. And I didn't quit my career by any means. I said, I'm going to continue this, but I ended up in Boston, and I ended up getting into with the guys from Boston and in the underworld and everything, and I started running drugs in that time to support myself. And at the same time, I started boxing with the likes of Vinny Pazienza, the 5-time world champion. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Vinny Pazienza. And there's a movie after him that called Bleed for This. And that said, we trained every day, me and Vinny. And we trained every day. I drove from Boston to Rhode Island, which wasn't far. It was about a 45-minute drive for me. And then we fought together in Atlantic City. And at the time, his manager was Lou Duva, who at one time was a huge boxing promoter and manager at the time in the business. And he promoted a lot of top fighters. And his company was Top Rank, if you will. And I was sent down to New Jersey, where Lou Duva lived and stuff like that, and his base was and all that. And I didn't know. I was down there sparring, and Vinny got cut one day, and we were sparring with world champions and stuff, and I was doing well and stuff, but I had no contract or anything like that. But I was sent down to Tony Cardinelli, my lawyer, who was very good friends with Lou Duva and the family, and he was trying to help me out and get me progress me, if you will. And Lou Duva one day says to me, "Hey, how come you didn't show up at the gym? You got to show up at the gym." Started yelling at me one day. I look at it, well, Vinny didn't go because he was cut, so I didn't think I had to go. Well, you got to come here. I was like, excuse me? You don't even get a contract with me. And I understand at the time I was young. I didn't totally get it. Like, who are you yelling at? See you later. Have a nice day. And this is after I'd done sparring in his gym with like some really good fighters that he had, and I kicked their ass. So one day he calls Tony Cardinelli. He says, "Where'd that Irish kid go from Boston that you sent down here? He was kicking some ass. Where the hell he go?" So Tony goes, "I have no idea. He hasn't called me. I don't know where he is." Meanwhile, I started training and did some other fights. I fought 9 professional fights total, but at the same time, I started getting deeper into the underworld, where the money was really there.
Yeah, I want to visit that part now a little bit. So let's just put a pin for a second to the boxing and cross over, because this is kind of where they merge and sprout, right?
Right.
You've done some prison time for being pinched for selling cocaine, I believe, right?
I ran the cocaine industry for Whitey Bulger.
Yeah. So just the progression, how that evolved from about this point in time, I think it was, right? You started running some drugs. Was it cocaine at the time? How much were you running at the time? What was that life starting to become like?
I started out a small time. I started out a small time as selling, grams and stuff like that, and ounces and stuff like that. So it was small time, but it was good money, and I sold a lot of it, so it was good money. And I had plenty of money coming in, and I still was boxing at the time, so I was able to support myself and not have any problems, and be my own boss, if you will, at that time. But that said, eventually I started growing bigger and bigger, and I started rising up the ladder. And so all those guys that introduced me to that world, and that were, were the guys that I had gotten my supplies, if you will, from. I surpassed them.
Over what time frame from when you started selling the small amounts did it take for you to grow to the huge quantities?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So it happened pretty quick. And it started around what age? Around the 18, 19, 20 years old?
Yeah, not 18, 19.
And this wasn't for Whitey Bulger straight away. It was down the track where you met Whitey, or did you already
No, it wasn't. It wasn't for Whitey per se. I was getting some stuff from his guys, and then I found my own connections in Miami and stuff like that, and I started running my own I started running my own stuff.
Give me an understanding of the breakdown, how it works over there around Boston. I imagine you've got different mob guys, different sectors where you can't cross over, sell into someone else's area or something like that. What was that like for you specifically, and how did it grow? What trouble came along? Confrontations. I want to hear some of those stories.
So at that time, I took a little from Whitey's guys, and I took a lot from my side, if you will, and just to keep things at peace, if you will. And eventually, they knew something was going on because they see me in the fancy cars and at a young age, and the lifestyle I was living at that time, if you will, the clothing, the this, the that, if you will, and they eventually approached me and asked me, "Hey, Red, we know you know, we know what you're taking from us, but we know it's more than that. It has to be." So I had a conversation with him. It wasn't a threat, but it was more an invite at the time. And because if they had threatened me, I don't think that it would have worked out well, if you will.
For who?
For either one of us.
So yeah, it's sometimes wise to approach in that non-aggressive way, right? Which was the right way to approach you. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they weren't. They knew that they weren't. They knew my reputation as a young guy. You know, they knew that I wasn't the type of guy that you approached harshly. So understood, you know, on their behalf. So we got to talking, and I said to them, I said, "Well, let me be frank." And I was, and we had a conversation. They said, "Why don't you join us?
What was that conversation?
Conversation was what you know, about my frankness, and that what they have is shit. Their stuff sucks, and that they're overcharging, and that I can get it for a much better price, and I can get the quantities with no problem. So as a businessman, in that business, that's exactly what you want and need, if you will. And so the head boss at the time that ran everything for Whitey, he said, "Why don't you join us?" He said, and he brokered the deal. And he said, "Red's going to come in. He's going to run everything. He's going to get down. He's going to bring everything back. He's going to break things down. He has his own clientele. His own clientele will stay with him. And we'll leave it at that." That's a no-brainer for me. But it goes a little further than that. Eventually down the road, he says to me, "Your clientele, what you're going to do is you're going to take some of the stuff that you got from Miami for us, and you're going to use some of that stuff for your clientele, and you're going to give me some of that money." And that there I did not like. That there I said to myself, this is a fucking problem. This is a problem.
Before we visit down that track, just to give me an idea, what sort of quantities were you moving at the time then, and what time frame into the piece did they try to pull that on you?
So I started out with a kilo, and I flew with the kilo from Miami, from the Keys, to Miami Airport to Boston. I had it strapped to myself.
So you were going through customs and everything, flying on the plane, strapping it to yourself, and it was just you were a one-man band at the time, or did you have a crew of people?
No, it was a one-man band. I didn't trust anybody.
How often were you flying through with it?
One thing I was taught was to do things by yourself when you need to.
When you can.
That is serious. Yep, when you can, yes. Yep.
How often were you flying through with keys strapped to you? your body.
It didn't take me long to sell that first key. I'll tell you that. After I broke it down, I made a good amount of money, and I went back for more, and then eventually more and more and more and more and more, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. So before you know it, you have 20 kilos in your trunk. You can't carry that on your waist.
Was this this is around the 80s?
Yes, it was late 80s. Yep.
And so your contact was around Miami, and so you didn't have to go to like South America or anything like that. You'd meet it there, and you'd bring it through up to where you were up in Boston.
Exactly. No, they brought it straight. They brought it straight to me, and it was the real deal right off the plane and everything else.
Were there any times where you nearly got pinched at the airport or searched with?
There was one time that somebody who introduced me, and it was in the very beginning, and they passed away now. But we were walking in the airport, and they were high on the stuff, and I didn't do it. I didn't, I had experience like once in my time with cocaine, and it wasn't a very good time for me when I did that. And it was an experience that taught me a lesson not to use it. But that said, they were high as a kite, and we had the troopers in the airport walking towards us, and they were staring like so paranoid at the troopers, like, "Oh fuck!" Like, "Oh, the eyes are bugged out." And
sure,
I had to distract them and make them look at me and smile and stuff like that, and let the troopers walk by and say, "Don't ever fucking do that again. Don't ever fucking do that again."
That should bring you down from them dropping the ball, from getting high. They say don't get high on your own supply, and
exactly.
You get success from that, obviously, right?
Exactly.
So you're bringing in keys, what, once or twice a week, a month?
So I started out, it took about a month to get rid of the key after I broke it down and stuff like that. It took about a month in the beginning, and then after that, I started escalating immensely, and then so it was a couple of keys a month, and then it went from a couple of keys a month, and of course eventually it went to at least 20 keys, 15, 20 keys a month anyway, easily.
But you weren't strapping that to you, still getting it through a month.
No. I had a drive.
No way.
I had my own drivers and stuff like that, and all that good stuff. So, yep.
So what sort of money are you earning then when you're turning over all this coke?
Hundreds of thousands
a month. Wow.
Hundreds of thousands.
And so that's a lot of money for a kid that grew up in the projects, right? And whose mother was struggling at work, and then bang.
That had zero.
Yeah, that had zero.
That had zero.
So like you said, you were buying cars and things like that? Were you splurging it around, enjoying yourself?
Oh, yeah. I take vacations. And then I started getting to the fine dining and the culinary part of
That's a trumpet. That's someone blowing a trumpet of success there.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
The culinary part of it, and the clothing part of it, the fine dining, the wines, and so I started at an early age learning wines and red wines and white wines and champagnes and you name that. I started learning that. I mean, you could walk. Yeah, I mean, you'd walk into my house, and I used to get wines from the guys, the boosters, if you call it, if you would. They'd say, "Hey, Johnny, what do you need? Red, what do you need?" I said, "Give me some Rothschild, Margaux, and stuff like that." So you walk into my house, I'd have just on the counter alone, I'd have, I don't know, I want to say, each bottle was anywhere from $300 to $500 to $600 a bottle anyway, and I'd have at least 10 bottles in on the counter anyway when you walked into my house. So, yeah, I started at an early age learning about that.
So I mean, with that lifestyle comes a lot, right? And one of those things that does come along is trouble, right? Issues, people trying to creep in, as you were talking about, Whitey Bulger's guys, which I'm assuming is the Winter Hill gang that you're talking about.
Yeah, he's came from the Winter Hill gang. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Before that, though, what sort of trouble or people trying to staunch you out did you have along the way, or did you get into some fights? Was there any guns pulled? I want to know what issues you had to protect your business.
So I ran my business, and what happened was the head guy eventually was told to leave, and he was told to leave, and once he was told to leave, after Whitey told him, I became the head guy.
So you only really had the dealings with Whitey's crew. There was not really any trouble before that.
No, there was trouble where, like, somebody was in my neighborhood, in my area, and I was able to do it. I was able to sell and do what I wanted to because I was a money maker. And they didn't get in the way of that because they were making the money from me at that time. And I had guys that I'd go to and I'd say, are you selling something to my guy? Oh, no. So I used to wait for him, and I used to sit, and I'd wait, and I'd watch, and I'd wait to see if they visited that individual. I used to wait early in the morning or late at night, and I'd wait for them, and I'd say, oh, there they are, and then I'd visit them, and then I'd say, I thought you weren't doing that. A couple instances, I had to handle my business, of course, because it was stomping on my feet and my business, and I wanted to protect my business.
Are you able to go into a situation? You don't have to if you don't want to, of course.
No, I can. There were people that I had to, that I said, the money that you just got out of there, it's my money now. That's my money you're taking from me because this is my area. This is my street. This is my neighborhood. I said, and you're taking from me now. I said, you think this is like earned, like with no problem? No, it's earned. You earn it.
Earned on the streets, yeah. Earned hard,
and you earn
right?
it on the streets, and you earn it hard. You just don't come in and just take something from somebody that worked hard at it. So I had to do what I had to do at the time, and whether it became physical or not, I did what I had to do. Sometimes it did become physical, and sometimes people ended up on the wrong end of the stick with me, if you will.
You obviously had yourself a name. No one really wanted to fuck around with you, so there had to be some examples set at the start for people to know that, right? Was that more towards the beginning, or was that any time along the way?
I always like to do it physically, and just send a message.
Okay.
And that way, they're still talking to their family the next day, if you will, but they'll be in some pain.
Sure.
And there shouldn't be any more problems after that. I remember one time a guy owed me, a lot of money, and he kept ducking me. He kept hiding, and I'm trying to get my money. And it was a significant amount of money. I mean, it was $10,000. I mean, that he owed me, not a lot of money, but enough. But it wasn't so much the money with me. It was about the principle. And so I waited for him. And I found out where he was going. So I waited, and I talk about this in Rap Acids, my book. And I said, I'm going to give him something that he's going to remember and everyone else is going to remember. It's easy for someone to walk up and say, oh, I'm going to shoot this guy and kill this guy, right? And that's what you do, right? But people are never
Dead guy
sure
doesn't
about.
pay, do they?
People are never. People are never sure. People are never sure about the fact. So it's usually much better to do something physically. That way, that person actually has something to say about it, and it gets around. So this particular individual owed me a significant amount of money, but nothing that's at that time was going to make or break me, if you will. But
Again,
it was the principle.
Principle's the matter here. Yeah, the principle is the matter.
Right.
Yep,
it's
absolutely.
the principle. So I said, okay. I left a bat in the gutter in the street near where he was staying, and I waited. I walked down the street when I seen him with dark clothing on. I had nothing in my hand, so I looked like just a regular person walking down the street. I picked the bat out of the gutter, and I handled my business on him. He knew it was me, and he left town afterwards, but it was known because he said something about it after the fact and why he left. And it never happened again to me. It's
Make
better
an
than
example.
Yeah, I
out of
made
him.
an example out of him. But the good thing about it is that, yes, he got a beating. And, not that I'm proud of that by any means. But
That's just the life, right? That's part of that
it's
life
just
with
part
what
of
you're
the
doing.
life. Exactly.
He knew the
I mean,
consequences for not paying that money, right? Let's just be open and honest, like men here. Sure, a lot of things went on that weren't right, but that's the life that you choose to earn, and that's the result.
And the funny thing about it, that life, is that we're all in it together. I mean, you know what you're doing in that life. You know what you're doing wrong. You know it's not legal. You know that it's wrong, as well as I did. These are the chances that we take in this life. We're all in this together. I had a guy say to me, "Oh, you hooked me on drugs." First of all, I wasn't the one who hooked him on drugs. Second of all, it was heroin, which I had nothing to do with heroin in my life. And second of all, I said to him, just as Whitey Bulger said to me at one time, even though Whitey was a rat originally, I said, first of all, I didn't force anything. First of all, sir, I don't know who you are. I said, but we're all in this life together when you get involved in that life. I said, I'm sure nobody forced anything down your throat. You had to make a decision for yourself to say, hey, I want to try that. Hey, I want to do this. That's your choice. Just as it was my choice to say, hey, I can make money over here in doing this, whether it's right or wrong. I took that choice. So
Let's be realistic, right? If he was actually getting hooked off the source that directly from you, let's say, even though it wasn't, but let's say it was, and you were removed from the streets, the source would still go to him in some other way. When someone's taken out, the gap gets filled with somebody else, right?
Well, let me just say this. Heroin was not allowed in my day. Whitey said no heroin in the fucking city. No heroin in the town. None. Zero. He didn't mind the marijuana. He didn't mind the cocaine partiers on the weekend and stuff like that. The weekend partiers, the weekend warriors, if you will. He didn't mind that. But there was no heroin. This came after the fact. So I says to the guy, well, what was your choice of drug? What happened? He told me. So I let him speak. And he tried to interrupt me, and I said, no. I gave you a chance to speak. I listened like a gentleman. Now you're going to listen to me like a gentleman. And I said, listen, I wasn't around in those days because I was locked up in prison, first of all. I was doing 12 years in prison. And second of all, heroin wasn't allowed back then. Why didn't allow it? He said no to heroin, which was a good thing, first of all. And second of all, I said, No, I'm sure nobody forced anything down your throat and put a gun to your head and say you had to take it. I said, so you know what? I accepted my responsibilities for the man I am. I look in the mirror and I say, you know what? That's on me. It takes a strong person to reach inside themselves and say, I'm here because of me. Maybe you need to do the same thing.
Hey, fucking men. Reds, we've got a message sitting here from one of the listeners. So just to quickly do a refresh, is that we are live here on Fireside. If you're on any other platform, Fireside is where you need to be to interact live with the audience. You can send voicemails into my Instagram and I'll play them like what I'm about to do right now for Dave. But we also have one on the screen. It is a message from Seth who said, brilliant questions, Rock. So thank you very much, Seth. I appreciate that. But Reds, here's a question for you.
Hey, Rock, great show as it's going so far. And Mr. Shea, I won't call you Red. I know you said Rock could do that, but I don't know you and I don't want to offend you. But it is a great show. I don't have a question yet, but I just need to let you guys know the wife and I are glued to this like we're watching must-see TV. This is a great show. Keep it up. And if I come up with something, but I think, Rock, you're going to hit all the questions. But so nice to meet you and Mr. Shea. And Rock, keep up the good work, and we're here listening to the end.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate that.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
He's too scared to call you Red.
I thank all you people for being on and watching this program this evening, today, if you will. Evening in
for the listeners, I am. Clap it up for Reds here in the listeners on Fireside if you can. There we go. That's the listeners listening here. All right. Thank you very much. So something you mentioned there was Whitey. Let's go into that a little bit. We might be skipping forward a little bit, but we can revisit back again in a second. I want to know sort of the time where you met Whitey and how that relationship started to form.
So Whitey grew up with a family member of mine. He grew up with a family member of mine, and so he grew up at a young age with him, and they used to go out hijacking themselves together and stuff like that. And so that said, I actually met Whitey about the age of 16 years of age.
How old was he? Because he's a bit older than you, right?
Yeah. So I would say at that time he was definitely in his late 50s, if you will.
Right.
Because when he died, he was like
89, I think.
No, well, somewhere around there, yeah. So he was like in his late 50s, if you will, at the time, and I was a young kid, and he wore these tight pants, and I was like these tight jeans, and I was like, I didn't know him that well, and then one of the guys said, I was like, what the hell is that guy with the tight jeans on? The skinny jeans on, if you will. Especially back then. I mean, so, and I was, oh, that's Whitey. I said, oh, yeah, he grew up with a family member of mine, and they used to go out robbing together and stuff like that, and all that good stuff. And he used to tell me stories about him later on after I got to really know Whitey. He used to tell me stories about him and the family member going out and robbing and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, I used to pull him every time. He'd be like, what are you looking at? He'd say to some guy, we can't have any trouble. We're out here trying to make some money illegally. We don't want any more, we don't want to raise any antennas on us, if you will. So, but so I met him at a young age. And then eventually it was always like, he kept an eye, and he always knew who was who and what was happening and who was up and coming and stuff like that. Very intelligent about that, of course, because that's his business, right? He needed to know who was up and coming and who was formidable and who he had to keep an eye out for, if you will.
What was his persona like? Was he quite I mean, I know that after he died, I saw some clips about some people that obviously were whacked through the crew along the way, family members that were still alive, happy that he had passed, but he seemed like he was a brutal man when it came to business like that.
He was brutal. There was no doubt about him being brutal. He was definitely a brutal individual, but he had a lot of charisma. And I'll be honest with you, at such a young age, I was always looking for that father figure, if you will. So I was always enamored, and I was not just enamored of him. I was always enamored with the other guys too, growing up. But of course, he was the big prize, if you will, the big boss, and so it made more of for me. It made it more enticing, if you will, and the respect and the honor and the fear, if you will, and the charisma that he had. He was a very charismatic guy. As a matter of fact, he came from a very charismatic family and an intelligent family, if you will. And that said, um, you know, he was almost, I was in awe of him in ways because of all of that, of all those qualities that he had at the time. But at the same time, he could be a very tenacious and brutal and demanding individual. And sometimes for me, because I was such a young man and I wasn't advanced in thinking and as well, and as street savvy or as academically, because I say academically because he didn't have a college education or anything, but he came from a family that had college educations and very high IQ. That he was very well read. He was very, very well read, and that's what helped him advance himself, where he could speak to a CEO of a company to a Doug in the projects.
So he was had the gift of the silver tongue. He could talk, and he was
I wouldn't say
a street guy as well.
I wouldn't say the gift of a silver tongue, but the gift of intelligence.
His street IQ was high.
He was a very high IQ. Yes, very high IQ. Yeah, and
I find when I listen to a lot of these sort of stories with a lot of mob guys that some of the top successes, right? A lot of them didn't finish school. They are uneducated, but it doesn't mean they didn't have the ability, right? And so they still find a way. Maybe they can't complete a task, but they'll damn well know how to put a team together to complete that for them still. Their drive is still high. And it sounds like he may have fallen into that category as well.
100%. And I mean, this guy was, if he was the CEO, he could have been the CEO of a Fortune 500 company at any time of the day, if you will. He was that intelligent.
Do you happen to know, and we won't go down the track too much, but just curiously, do you happen to know how he fell into the life of crime like he did with having so much intelligence like that? And from what seems like to be not such a bad upbringing.
So he grew up in the same, pretty much the same way I did in the projects. He grew up in the projects across the way from me, which is called the Mary Ellen McCormick Projects, and they call it the Old Harbor Projects, nickname. And that said, he grew up in, his father had a disability. They didn't have much money and stuff like that. So, his other brothers that he had, they went to college, and as a matter of fact, his one brother, he became an extremely big politician in Boston, and he became the Senate president in Boston, if you will, for many years. He was stronger than the governor of Boston. As a matter of fact, many politicians here in the United States, when they go to run for office, they make sure that they come and visit him and sit with him and have lunch with him and stuff like that, and pick his mind on about politics and how to move forward and how to maneuver. That's how intelligent and how vast the family had become in
interesting that
in the Boston community.
Okay, so going back to you and Whitey then, so you were at a fairly young age. You knew him, but when was your real, like, I guess, manly interactions with him as an adult when it came to business?
So I started up with the guys, and little by little, as I said earlier, with selling cocaine and stuff like that. And eventually I was running around selling cocaine, and I was a little hot-headed, of course, and being a young guy, not being as cool and positive, and and I was always trying to show my brawn, because I thought that was a good
Part of
way
the
of
job, right?
I thought it was a good way of trying to advance myself, and which, in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it isn't. Um, you really should only show your brawn unless you really have to, if you will. But at such a young age, you don't know that, you don't understand that. And so those are learning curves and learning things that you learn as you go along in life. So at that time, I was a little wild, you know. I mean, I could pull a shotgun out of my car in 2 seconds and start firing off and say, what son of a bitch needs a problem now? Is looking for a problem now. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. And I remember one night I was, by the way, I was so young that I wasn't the age of 21 yet to get into a bar in Boston, but I was able to get into all the bars, and because I was with all the guys, if you will, at such a young age, and I was making money doing that. And at times, I didn't even need them to get into the bars. And I remember one night I was out in the bar, and guy pissed me off. He was joking around with me, and he thought it was funny. And across the street from the bar, which was one of Whitey's bars that he was connected to with one of his guys, was a church and a place where the nuns lived, the Catholic nuns. And so sometimes it could get a little rowdy, with the people coming out drunk and stuff. But this particular night, the guy pissed me off, and I opened up the car door, and I pulled out a shotgun, and I started shooting in the air at him. I said, and he started running like a little bitch down the street, if you will. I said, well, I guess you won't be joking with me no more after that, will you? So the next day I get an ask by one of Whitey's guys. He says, hey, Red, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, yeah, sure. What is it? He said, could you do me a favor? I got a call last night from the rectory over there where the nuns live. I said, yeah. He said, and they heard shotguns going off. Could you not do that no more around here at night? I said, absolutely. I said, you got that. Not a problem. So
was it because they asked you like that and you were part of the crew? You may have known the trouble, or just the way they asked you was like, all right, respect.
I actually wasn't really part of the crew. I was involved with the crew, but I wasn't part of the crew at that time.
Right.
So, but because he asked me nicely, I was able to say, not a problem.
Sure. Well, then let's revisit back where we didn't kick off from before. We stopped it at that point, is where you were making the deals, and one of the guys said to you, you're going to use this stuff and you're going to give me the money. They told you like that, and you said you didn't like that. What happened from that point forth?
I didn't take this stuff. I didn't use this stuff. They needed to
get pissed off.
They weren't happy about it, but they needed to cooperate with me, and then you either cooperate. We can either cooperate or we cannot cooperate. It's either going to be on terms that we can come to, which I feel is favorable for me, in a good sense, but also favorable for you too. Something's better than nothing, if you will. But in the end, I'm sure you're going to be happy with the end result. So that said, they were happy with that, and we all made a lot of money.
You weren't scared of the repercussions of saying that to them initially?
No, I wasn't scared. when you're young like that, you just sometimes the fear doesn't get in the way. Unfortunately, I happen to be I happen to have a lot of guts at the time, a lot of balls, if you will, and sometimes that was good, and sometimes that was not good. Um, sometimes I'd have to stand up and take control with my balls. And sometimes I didn't have to with my balls, if you will. It
Sure.
ebbs and flows, if you will, like the sea.
I'm curious to know, did South Boston Irish mobsters cross with the I'm assuming North Boston with the Italian mob? I mean, were you working together? Were you fighting against each other, or what was the sort of boundaries there?
So of course I knew Italian guys and stuff like that, but Whitey had Whitey was in control of that. Whitey and him and his partner were in control of that. Stevie Flemmy, they were the ones that were dealing with the mobsters from that side of town, and eventually it come out in the end when all the Italians got indicted. They found out, they didn't know what was happening at the time, but there were tapes where the mobsters, the head mobster was on tape saying, anyone that we want killed, Whitey and Stevie will do it for us. No problem. Meaning the Irish people will do it for them.
So the Irish crew were on the tapes then.
They had the Italians talking about the Irish on the tapes, and they had some Irish on the tapes too, but there wasn't anything at that time totally criminal. Maybe for a reason or so. Maybe the government was protecting Whitey because he was an FBI informant working with the government at the time. Who knows?
Whitey was?
He was, yes.
Right. So was he working as an informant for a long time?
Unfortunately, he started out early, but the guy he was involved with, his partner, that was the other guy that was in charge, he was an FBI informant before him.
Right.
Unbeknownst to so many people,
sure.
and me, myself, and that's why this book, Rat Bastards, comes into play.
Okay.
Because, so.
All right, we're definitely going to touch on that shortly. So do you think that by being an informant gave him immunity to do specific things to get so far and hold his power for so long because they were still understanding 100%. The racket? Wow. Okay.
100%. 100%. He had full control of the FBI in Boston. He was paying them off. He was giving them gifts and everything else. And that was...
So hang on, he was an informant or they were on the books or both?
Both.
Right. That's mixed up. So he's having to give him information, but he's keeping them on the books too, I guess, just stopping himself from going to jail.
Well, he went in first he got his foot in there by giving him some information. And once he got his foot in there by giving him some information, he started giving them gifts.
Sure. And this went on for years?
Yeah, it went on for a long time.
Wow. All right. So, how do you start to become part of the crew? What part does this start to happen?
So, as I was saying earlier, I started moving myself and doing my own thing from Miami. And the guys came to me, the head guy, and he said, "Hey, Johnny, hey, Red, we know you're making more money and getting somewhere else because you're doing bigger things." So I thought about it and I said, well, I'm either going to deny this or we're going to have a conversation. So I said, you know what? Because the way he expressed himself to me, saying, we're not here to argue with you. We're here to maybe even work with you. When he said that to me, that's where the bell went off in my head, business-wise. I said, well, maybe there's an opportunity here now that could be even better. But I'll be honest with you, it was my downfall. my downfall, because once I get involved with these guys, because they had such a high profile on them from the FBI and stuff like that, and the DEA, that now I fall into a bigger category where I was more under the radar than they were, if you will. So
I want to ask you a question, which just think about before you answer, is that as you become more part of that crew with Whitey, and they're doing some pretty bad fucking things along the way, did they start to get you to do any particular jobs or hits or anything that was out of what you were doing before, but because you're part of that crew, they expected you to do this work for them? You don't have to answer that question. I'm just putting it out there.
I'm going to say this. I'll answer it this way, and I'm going to be very honest, straightforward. They never needed to say that to me. As a matter of fact, what was said to me was, if there's do not lose your temper. Do not do anything unnecessary. If there's a problem, let me know. They didn't want me to do things out of haste. And that said, they didn't want me to do things that they thought might jeopardize me in any way in that sense. So they
Sure.
wanted to handle it in the more professional way, because again, I was young and I was still up and coming, where I was a little more quicker to do something that didn't need
Control
to be
your
done.
rage. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, different guys are good at different things, or
Well, I mean,
work on
that's a learning thing. You learn it as you get older.
Sure. But I mean, you're in this position where you're earning for them to jeopardize your position because you're being good at that particular thing.
Right. They didn't want me to jeopardize. Yeah, they didn't want me.
Don't fuck it up.
Did they know I was capable? Absolutely, they knew I was capable. But that's why they forewarned me on that.
Sure.
They knew.
Okay, and sorry.
They
knew.
They knew. Yeah, they knew. So I mean, they didn't want to jeopardize me from. They didn't want to lose the money part of it. They were all about the business part of it. And if there was something that needed to be that needed to be addressed, they won't. They all I had to do was say something to Whitey or the head guy at the time.
When you sort of hit the peak of the dealing with cocaine, how much were you moving, and roughly what money were you bringing in for yourself and for Whitey or the crew? I mean, give us an idea of the turnover, so we can.
So when I started with those guys, when I went in with
not so much started with them, but at the peak of it, yeah. Like when you guys are like, how much are you moving at the peak of things before you pinched or anything like that, and what money's coming through?
Well, at that time when I got indicted, I was 15, 20 kilos easy a month, easy. But you have to realize it wasn't just like giving a whole kilo out. This is a lot. Most of the time,
Sure.
It was all broke. These kilos are all broken down, so it was in multiple sources. It wasn't just like one whole kilo to somebody or something like that. It was a vast business, a broken down business, broken down kilos. So that said, you had a lot of people that you were dealing with, a lot of business, if you will, that was being dealt. Because that's where you can make a lot of money by just doing the one drops and the big drops. But if you have a business of that sense of ounces and stuff like that, especially ounces, an ounce business in kilos and stuff, I mean, you could break a kilo up and add stuff to it. I mean, you could get almost 2 kilos out of a kilo, if you will. I mean, so you're talking 30 kilos.
So it was that pure? You could cut it twice. You could cut it double it.
Oh yeah, it was good stuff. As a matter of fact, one of the guys, the head guys at the time, he eventually testified in court against Whitey Bulger when he eventually went to trial after so many years. He was on the run for so many years. He was actually number 2 on the list behind Osama bin Laden.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that said, and I can't even tell you how many times he was living in San Diego at the time, and my friend lived 4 blocks from where he lived. So I'd walk by where he lived. I walked by that apartment. This is what a small world it is, Boston to San Diego. I walked by that apartment at least 4 times in my time. Could you believe that? That he
Right.
was living there, and I walked by that apartment 4 times.
Wow.
Amazing.
When he was on the run, on the lam,
Well, he was
hiding.
on lam, yeah, hiding.
Yeah. Wow. Were there specific mafia families that you would mix with and certain ones that you wouldn't from the Italians? So were the Irish all working together as a unit? And when you're kind of crossing over, I'm imagining that you're crossing over with the North End, with the Italians. Like, were you working with the Gambinos? You wouldn't work with the Colombos or something like that? Or is it just anyone depending on the turf? I'm just trying to understand the network a bit more.
It depended on the people that you worked with and who they were connected to, is the bottom line. It all depended on that. Of course, later on in my lifetime, as I grew older and bigger and stronger, and once I got indicted, I started meeting people from stronger organizations, if you will, throughout the world, and becoming friends with them, and having new friends in the world, even bigger than Whitey, if you will. That were worldly connect. That were really worldly connected, if you will. But that said,
this is before you got pinched or after?
No, it was after I got pinched. This is
right.
when I did time in prison and stuff like that. I had become friends with a lot of high profile mobsters and organized crime guys.
Before you went to prison or got indicted, had you had any negative encounters with Whitey, or was the relationship pretty good, tight? You were earning for
Whitey ran everything with an iron fist. Sometimes I used to get yelled at for stupid shit, if you will. Like, why are you driving in a fancy car? What are you doing in a fancy car? You're going to cause heat on yourself. So that said, at the time, I was like, yeah, a young kid. Yeah, I get it. I was making so much money. Like, why can't I have a nice car? Why can't I have this? Right. So anyhow, at a young age, you're like, why can't I have it? Right. But as as an adult, you get that, you understand that part of it. But that said, when I look back on it and I go, all the advice that he had given me and all the schooling that he had given me, it was almost like, and then towards the end, when I got indicted, I was like, before I get indicted, I knew that there was a lot of heat on us. And I said to him, I think I'm gonna quit for a while. I think I'm gonna back off for a while. I think I'm gonna go back into my boxing career, because I was still young, And he said to me, "You don't want to do that." And I looked at him, and I just was looking at him dumbfounded, like, what would make you say that? Why? Why wouldn't I want to take the heat off of me and take the heat off of us?
Because you're earning too much for him. Was that it?
Not just that. No, because he knew what was happening. He knew the investigation. He knew exactly what was happening.
Right. Yeah.
And he knew that I would never rat on him. And I was a young guy, and that I could take the heat, and I could take the time because I was young. He was a very calculating, very intelligent man. So he knew all these. He knew the play, A, and B. He knew it because he had tested me. he had tested me, and he had tested me where I was put under. And I talk about this in Rap Bastards, where I was put under a situation where I was threatened with an Uzi in a basement, and I wasn't going to come out of that basement unless I told him everything and what I needed and he wanted to know about my friends, good friends of mine.
Threatened by who? Sorry,
by Whitey.
Right.
And he wanted to know how much money they had, and I said to him, whatever money they have. Now, mind you, I was just a young guy. Excuse me. I was just a young guy. And I looked at him and I said, in a basement of all places, right? I said, whatever money they have, it's my money. I gave it to them. They earned it through me. I said, so if you need to do anything, do what you got to fucking do now. And that's exactly what happened.
What was his reaction to that?
Oh, he realized that after that he knew he had a solid fucking guy with him. And that was the test. And after that, that's when I became the boss of the drug industry.
Okay, tell me what entails that to become the boss then. What step up was it from what you were doing to get that position? How much more of a workload? How much more money?
I earned a bigger profit.
A bigger cut, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, I remember when we'd sit up the table and we'd count this money every 2 weeks, and it'd be a long ass table, dining room table, if you will. And we'd count the money up at the money counter, and we'd all walk out of the place, out of the house, if you will, with duffel bag full of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars full of in bags full of money. You know what that was like for a young guy like me at that time?
Especially back then, right?
Especially back then. I mean, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fucking insane.
Sure.
Insane.
It's extremely tempting to never leave that sort of life, right? The world's at your fingertips in a way. You could buy everything. That's what you think.
Exactly. And you say that now, even now today to me. I mean, it's a lot of money, and once you had a taste of that, a taste of that living, you're always like, it's kind of like being a drug addict, if you will. Then once a drug addict, always a drug addict. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But, I know better than that. I'm a lot smarter than that, and I know that I'll only go the wrong way, So life has definitely changed for me, and I've had the blessed opportunity to advance my life since then.
Which I want to get into as well. Like we're harping on all the past life stuff, but we'll get to the positive part as well towards the end. But let's go to the part now about you getting pinched. You were obviously under investigation. How did it happen? Explain explain the whole moment where it all happened to you.
So this had been going on for a few years actually, and eventually they wanted Whitey and his right hand man Stevie Flemmy at the time first, but they couldn't get him to us through me, and eventually they indicted me. They indicted 50 some odd people in the ring, and I was the head guy, the leader of the 54, if you will. And I was the youngest. I was facing a criminal charge called an 848 federal status. An 848 is called a criminal continuing a criminal enterprise. a CCE, and that is a minimum of 20 years to life. So I was brought in by the DEA and the agents, and of course they interrogated me. And they wanted to know everything about what I could tell them about Whitey. And I said, Whitey who? Who's Whitey? Of course, they weren't too happy about that. And then one of the agents, he said to me, he got very violent and upset at me. And he started yelling. He said, you're going to get 40 years to fucking life. I stood up, and I was handcuffed. I stood up, and I looked at him in his face. And I said to him, it doesn't get any worse than life, does it? That was the end of that was the end of the interrogation. But still, they were trying to break me at such a young age. They figured because I was the youngest, and I'd never been to prison in my life, and I had lived a pretty good life for a few years, earning a lot of money and living a rock star lifestyle, if you will, that
that would scare you into giving them up and ratting them out.
Yeah, taking everything away from me will scare me enough to give him up and give anyone else up. Well, little did they know that they were dealing with the strongest link.
I want to just jump in real quick before we go off that, is that time that they're telling you you're going to get 40 years to life. And even though you have no intention on ratting anyone out, what is going through your mind? What is going through your mind that your life is just fucking done? But I mean, not the cost of ratting anyone out, but what's going through your mind? I don't know how I would react even in a position like that, just to think that everything's taken away from me forever. What was that like for you?
You know, it's like a good fighter. You know, you never let your opponent know that you're hurt, and that you keep standing strong, and you keep your poker face on. But at the same time, I'm going inside, fuck. This is it. This is it. It is what it is. That's why I have good lawyers. Hopefully my lawyers can help. But, you know, people say later on down the road, well, he was a rat, wasn't he? Well, he was. He was a rat with the FBI, but he wasn't a rat with the DEA. The DEA and the FBI didn't get along because of that. They knew that Whitey was a rat for them. So the DEA was the one who indicted me and tried to indict him and get him. In the end, that's who got Whitey.
Right. Where did you learn, or how important? Obviously, it's important. I'm trying to find out, what does it mean to you for if someone rats? I mean, what does that person become to you if they break that oath?
So, growing up in Southie, in the Irish enclave that I did, you know, you didn't rat on anybody, no matter what. And it's a funny story. Even Whitey's brother tells a story about how they were playing ball and they broke a window, and they wanted to know who the culprit was that broke the window. He said, we'd never tell on the person who broke the window. It's just not who we are in our culture, you know, being Irish. And you just weren't a rat. And as a matter of fact, these guys, Whitey and those guys, they were the first ones to be the first person to say, that guy's a rat, watch out for him, be careful. This guy, he's a snitch. This guy's saying this guy. They'd be the first ones. But meanwhile, all along, they were a rat themselves. And that's fucked up. But in all reality, growing up in Southie is you don't snitch. You never snitch. You take your lumps and you take your bumps. You accept your responsibility. Even if the next guy next to you can't, that doesn't mean you don't. And that was the rule of thumb. That was the code of honor. And that's just the way you grew up. You know, you didn't want to grow up as a snitch.
Was that the highest? That would be the highest value broken to rat. Everyone holds that in such a high value, right?
Well, I would say so. I would say so. Other than being a child molester, if you will. How much?
Yeah, within the code of the gang, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you're looking at maybe 40 years to life. Then what happens? Do they still detain you and you go through a court process? Are you finding out what's happening to your crew?
Most of my crew, all the guys that are underneath me, the majority of them all end up getting out on bail. I was the only guy that I couldn't get out on bail. And it took almost a year, I believe it or not, almost a year for me to end up finally getting out on the electronic bracelet, home confinement.
So you weren't charged with anything yet. They were still going through the process, but that was your bail.
No, I was charged, but
okay.
It was still pending. I wasn't convicted of anything yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So obviously, I think we skipped something in there. You've gone to court in this process time, or?
Yes, I had gone back and forth to court. As a matter of fact, I was being shipped from Danbury, Connecticut. And let me give you the distance from Danbury, Connecticut to, at the time, to Boston. It was a 3-hour ride without traffic. 3-hour ride in a van every day, back and forth. You're talking 6-7 hours a day, back and forth.
You were doing it in the same day, back and forth?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
And you get up early in the morning. They strip search you. From strip searching, getting your chains on that are locked around your legs, to your waist, to your hands, and you're shackled all around. And then when you get in Boston, the same thing again. They strip searching you, checking you, and then they bring you all the way back again. I did that for a while.
So, Reg, how old were you when you actually got indicted?
21.
21. All right. Okay, so you're going through this process now, court. Whitey's
maybe it was 21, 22, somewhere in that area.
Around there, yeah.
It's been a while. Sorry.
Sure. That's okay. So did Whitey come to the rescue with help for anything, money, anything like that, or he just?
Yeah, no, I was taken care of. He took care of my lawyer for me and stuff like that, and whatever funds I needed while I was away.
He knew where to butter his bread, right, as well, because obviously you're
of course. Well, he can use me in saying, because at that time nobody knew that was Rat. He still was a solid guy.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows where that would have taken him. Maybe he never gets indicted and I get out of prison and I'm still with him. And, now he's got, hey, I got Red Shea with me. What a solid fucking guy, right? I mean, he's part of my crew, right? I mean, think about that, right? Smart guy.
Yeah. He sounds, I can see he's plotting now. Like I can see him really, really working out 10 steps ahead, putting these puzzles together.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got found guilty, but not sentenced yet.
So I didn't get found guilty. I eventually waited, and then eventually I made a plea deal agreement where there was no cooperation against anybody. I just pled guilty to the charges that were being sentenced against me. Of course, I couldn't plead guilty unless they dropped that main charge, that CCE charge, Otherwise, because it was a minimum of 20 years, and why would I do that? I might as well go to trial then. But my lawyer was able to work it out, and I got very lucky on that, extremely lucky on that. I'll be very honest with you. I probably wouldn't be here today speaking and doing this interview if it wasn't for that. What happened was they were changing U.S. attorneys, head U.S. attorneys in here in Massachusetts at the time. And because a new president came in, and at the time it was Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was going to put a new attorney general in at the time, the U.S. attorney general. And the acting U.S. attorney general was like, no, it's not going to be you. It's going to be someone else. So he was a little pissed off about that, to be honest with you. And the head of organized crime didn't want to give me any type of break. And my lawyer had to go over his head to the head U.S. attorney. And he threw my picture of me when I was a kid sitting on a boxing stool. And he said, this is the guy you want to give 25, 40 years or better to in jail just because he won't be a snitch. So they had a conversation. He said, I still think that I can win this case to a certain extent and da-da-da-da-da. And according to him. And he said, if you plead him out for 12 years, he does 12 years in prison. I think that would be a fair deal. He said, but I can't make that happen unless you say it's okay. I'm going over the head of the organized crime boss. So he said, make it work. He said, because I'm leaving office anyway. He said, I'm not going to be the head attorney general. I'm going into private practice. You know, them attorneys, they're all in together. I just happened to get lucky. I really did. I happened to get lucky.
So, I mean, so what was it like for you to hear that news, right? That you plead guilty to get 12 years?
Just think about it. I did 12 years inside prison. It wasn't that I did
Which is
less
hard.
than
It's
12
hard
years.
regardless, right? It's not 40, but it's still fucking 12. It's still a while.
Exactly. It's still a while to do, right? I mean, think about it. So my only goal is not to get any more time while I was away. And I mean by, killing someone while I was in prison, if you will, because I know me. I know that I don't take no shit from anybody, of course. And, I was a lot younger looking at that time. So maybe somebody might have thought that they had and I'm not a huge guy by any means. So maybe somebody might think that they got an easy mark or something like that. So, I mean, shame on them. But at the same time, sorry for me, because I'm going to have to do something that might end up keeping me there longer, if you will. So I got lucky where that didn't happen, but I did end up losing almost. They give you a little bit of good time in the federal system. Of course, I lost every single good bit of good time that there was because of my altercations inside prison.
So you got into a few fights?
I had a few fights, yes. Yep.
Okay. What was prison like for you in general? Thanks, Sean. What was prison like for you in general? You're 20, 21, 22, and was it a maximum security prison that you were in? Yep.
Yeah, I was in with guys who were doing life and stuff like that. So
sure.
I wasn't in with the little babies. I was in with some serious guys. I was in mobsters and gangbangers, and these guys were 20 years and maybe some less, some higher, some whatever. Some guys were in I had already done 40 years inside prior to me getting there. I mean, seriously. So I mean, I wasn't put into a kiddie camp. I never went to a kiddie camp, and they did that on design, I'm sure. As a matter of fact, I tried to get to the kiddie camp, if you will, but they wouldn't let me go for some reason. I don't know why.
Right.
I don't think they liked me.
Well, it must have been a huge shock value from the lifestyle that you were living, earning hundreds of thousands a month, buying cars and whatever you're doing, to just slammed in there, having to keep your mouth shut. What was that? What was that new scene like for you initially?
It was funny because when I first started out, and they try to keep me in when I was fighting on for to try to get on a bail, and it was that a year-long process, if you will. The federal government was opening up a new place where they could house new inmates, and the U.S. Marshals were like, put money into this place, and I got wind of it through the grapevine that they were going to move me there, and they were going to use that in their defense to try to keep me in, so I couldn't get any bail or anything. And I got wind of it, if you will, through the grapevine, and I called my attorney and let him know immediately. He called the place immediately and got info on the place. So the next day when we went into court, they thought they were going to pull a fast one. When we went into court, my attorney was well prepared, and they were like shocked that he knew anything about anything. He was like, how the fuck did he know?
Sure.
Little did they know that I had friends too that from the neighborhood that they might have known. So anyhow, that said, it didn't work out for them. But they brought me to this new place in the U.S. Marshals, and these guys were gun-ho. I mean, gun-ho. Sit down over there. Get over here. Do this. Do that. And I was shackled from my ankles to my waist to my wrist. And with the U.S. Marshals sitting there, and they already knew. Right in front of them, I said, who the fuck are you talking to? Right off the bat. Who the fuck are you talking to? I said, let me fucking tell you something. You show me respect. I understand you got a position here. You show me respect, I show you respect. Because I don't want to be here any more than you want to be here, I'm sure. You talk to me as a man, and I talk to you as a man. End of story. You don't fucking tell me to sit down and do whatever. You could tell me all. It ain't going to work between me and you, my friend. Not going to work at all. Show some fucking respect. The guy didn't know how to handle that. The guard. But the U.S. Marshals that were there, they went, well, they're going to learn you real quick, Red. Of course they did. But it wasn't long that I was there before I get out. I'm almost a year, believe it or not, as I said, onto the electronic bracelet. But I never wavered. I never wavered in my integrity. I never wavered in who I was as an individual. Did I like what I did in my lifetime? No. No, I didn't. I never liked what I did in my lifetime.
You've called your book Rat Bastard, right?
Correct.
Now, what point did you find out that Whitey was a rat? It was an informant.
I didn't learn that till I was well into my sentence, and there was rumors. As a matter of fact, I had a few words with some Italian fellas while I was away, and they mentioned something, and I said, do you know who you are? I said, you know who you're speaking to, right? Oh, yeah, I was just mentioned. I said, well, maybe you should use your head before you speak. I said, because I show honor to them. I show honor to Whitey. And if you don't know that for sure, then you shouldn't say something like that. I always gave Whitey the benefit of doubt, because there was a news article that came out when I got indicted. It said Whitey didn't get indicted because he's a stool pigeon. And it was leaked by a former FBI agent. He leaked it, but there was no backing behind it.
What does that mean?
So
He didn't get pinched because he was a stool pigeon.
he didn't get pinched with me or the crew, if you
Right.
will, because he was a rat.
Right.
And he said to me, Whitey said to me, Red, if they can't get me, the only way they'll try to get me is try to destroy my reputation. That's what he said to me. And I believed him.
But he's already planting the seeds for you in future that if you ever heard something, this is how clever he is, always planning ahead. Yeah.
Correct.
I totally see the plot of this guy, yeah.
So the rumors were there. Sometimes it come up, sometimes it didn't. Nobody really knew, but it happened to be mentioned one day, and I said to this individual, and he came back and apologized after the fact to me because nobody knew, even I didn't know. But I was doing my time for the things I did wrong, but also honoring them, Whitey. And to say that to me is a big insult to my face and to me. And without me losing my temper at the time, I handled it very consigliere-like, if you will. So that said, he apologized, and then eventually it did come out. It came out that Whitey, was a rat, and I made a phone call home about it, and I spoke to one of the guys that was there, and I asked him, and I said, "Is this true?" He said, "It's true." He said, "But I can live with it." I said, "You can live with it? You can live with the rats?" So I'm saying to myself, what the hell is this guy talking about? You can live with the rats. Oh, because you're still on the street and you haven't been indicted and you don't want any repercussions by saying the wrong things. That's what that's all about. I knew right off the bat. I took that phone as I was inside prison. I said, "You can live with it?" Well, I can't fucking live with it. And I slammed that fucking phone. If I'm telling you, I lost my shit because I gave my life and my honor and being how I grew up in the neighborhood and stuff like that at such a young age. And it felt like somebody reached through the phone.
Hustled you. Yeah.
It reached through the phone and just ripped my heart out.
Mm.
To be honest with you.
So
that said, I said that as a fighter, you have to handle these things. You have to handle situations like this. Just like a good soldier, I imagine, and I have many soldier friends. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be getting married soon, and a soldier.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. And a soldier is going to be officiating that, and he's served 21 years in the military, and he's done 6 tours in his lifetime, and he's seen a lot of battles.
I've literally been trying to reach out to an ex-vet for a podcast, so if you want to reach out to him, if he has any stories he wants to share, I'd love to interview him as well.
I'll ask him, but he's going to be officiating our wedding, mm-hmm. and in Hawaii, that is. So
with your beautiful wife, which I briefly just met before this show.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I've been very fortunate to meet, very fortunate to fall in love. But all that said, getting back to all that, when you go through things like that as a person, and the boxing side of it, the fighter side of it came through, where I might have been stunned for a minute, a few seconds, but I got my composure back pretty quickly. And I said to myself, I walked into prison as a man. I'm going to walk out as a man. I accept full responsibility. I'll never, never break my honor or my integrity. And that's what I did. I mean, I had the opportunity to, after the fact, after Whitey was caught and, my attorneys were approached and, hey, does Red want to come home early and he can testify against Whitey or tell us anything about Whitey and get early release? No. Nope.
How much time was left on your sentence when you found this out about Whitey?
It was about 3 years left.
Right.
There's another 3 years to go. I said no. I mean, of course, I did majority of my time, but even still, I mean,
doesn't matter. 3 years is 3 years. That's still, yeah.
Even if it was another 10 years, I wouldn't have done it.
Sure.
And a lot of people say, well, that guy's stupid for not doing that. Whatever, dude. Whatever, man. Whatever. You just didn't grow up in the street, and you just didn't grow up by, the code of ethics that I grew up with, and the integrity that I grew up with, and the ethnic culture that I grew up with, where if you do something wrong with your fellas and your boys, even in the Irish world, and I'm going to say this, the Irish have a strong hold that I know of, where you just don't tell on each other. I mean, the Irish had been always under the thumb of England as it was, to be honest with you, and to be a traitor to your own, it was always it wasn't. They didn't show integrity by doing that, and it wasn't accepted, and it carried on.
Red, you said that when you heard the news and it felt like your heart was ripped out, you said that you can't live with it. What did you mean by that? I mean, did you want to get some payback for it, or what happens in that situation? Did you just let it go?
No. I said I can't live with him being a rat.
With him being a rat, yeah.
I can't live with, and I couldn't live with him being a rat. But my loyalty was to him as a soldier, as a man to him,
as one of his
as
men,
someone,
yeah.
as someone that I looked up to, that I idolized. Every step of the way growing up, I always tried to, unfortunately, emulate him. I try to emulate him in so many ways that, I just couldn't live with that. But at the same time, I walked in as a man, as I said, and I was going to walk out as a man, and I would never become the individual that he was in the end. I would never become a snitch. I accept my responsibilities for the wrongs I've done in my life, and I'll pay my dues. And I did. And what I did, I did. That's the way, just the environment that I grew up in, and the life that I grew up in. And I can never bring that back. But at the same time, I like to say that I accept full responsibility, and that's where the integrity part comes in. Most people would say, "Oh, I can get out of prison. He was a rat against me, or he was always a rat, or fuck that. I want a rat anyway. Fuck that. I'm getting out. Oh, fuck that. Let me out now." No. And a lot of people might say, "Oh, he's stupid," or this or that, or whatever. Call it what you want. I call it integrity. I call it the guy when you're in a foxhole and you got a problem, and you're in that foxhole, and you got fire coming onto you, enemy fire coming at you. You want your partner next to you running out of the foxhole on you? That's not with me. I'm going to be right next to you. And that's how I thought. And that's why myself and so many friends that I have in the military respect me because of that.
let's start to move on from prison. You get out after 12 years, and what's life like? What plan do you have when you get out of prison? Was it to turn your life around, or did you know what you were going to do?
I get, prior to me coming home, I got asked that Mark Wahlberg wanted to meet me and even come visit me about my story, because he knew I was the youngest and knew that I was the only guy that ran an entity, meaning, a piece of the organization that didn't become a rat. Now, there were other guys smaller or whatever underneath that, they didn't rat either. They didn't do as much time, but they didn't rat. But that said, I was the only guy that ran an entity that didn't rat. That actually, my only person I ever spoke to was my only person that was my boss was Whitey Bulger. No one else. And that said, that's why the book company says, hey, let's use this, the only guy, while everybody else ran, the only guy who didn't run. Sometimes it sounds a little stupid, but they meant it integrity wise. So that said, yeah, I mean, just when I look back at it now, and it's a lot of emotions that go on, even still today.
How old are you now, Reds?
I'm an old man now. I'm an old man.
So you were about 34 or so when you came out of prison?
Yeah. No, I was about 36. Yeah.
36. Okay.
Yeah, I was like 36 years of age.
So,
and
I
today,
mean, so
I've
since
been happy.
36.
I've been happy. Mark Wahlberg, he wanted to visit me. As I said no. So eventually when I did, my boys picked me up from prison. We drove back from New Jersey. I was in New Jersey. They drove me back to Boston, but we stayed the night in New York City. And we had fun in New York City the night before. But you got to realize I hadn't seen the streets in 12 years. I mean, a lot changes in 12 years, let me tell you.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean,
well, you went in, when did you go in? About 1990-ish, around early 90s?
Yeah, early 90s, yeah.
So you came out after 2000, and I suppose that's when cell phones had come out. You would have seen them for the first time, I imagine.
So I had a cell phone back in the day, but it was like the Michael Douglas cell phone from Wall Street, if you will, and only rich people had those phones at the time. I mean, but anyhow, that said, it was I was handling it pretty well, but I was like, I adjusted to a lot of things pretty quickly. Maybe because that's the background I have with being a fighter and stuff like that, and seeing a lot of things and stuff like that, and being able to adjust quickly, if you will. But that said, I remember walking in New York the following day after the night we spent there, and there was so many people, and we were walking around. It was so crowded. And I seen people on the phone and this and that. I thought the feds were following me. I was like, I didn't know what the hell to think, And I started getting a little anxious. And my stomach started getting a little sick, because there was so much for me at once, And
overwhelmed, yeah.
I was becoming overwhelmed, yeah. And so we eventually got into the car, and we headed back to Boston from New York, and I made it home, and then I felt a lot better after that by relaxing for a little bit and not being around so many people. even today when I'm like, out, I get anxious when I'm around a lot of people. I just don't like a lot of people around me. I don't like being in a like let's say you're in a tourist area and there's hundreds of people all around. I don't like that. It's not for me. I'm just like, I like things. I like doing things, but I don't like being in a mob. Um, I just don't like it.
Sure.
I don't know how to call it, but even
Well, I
today,
think it sounds like a bit of PTSD from being on your own or alone in prison, in the prison system, to come back out to such big crowds after what is, whether you realize it or not, is traumatizing for you to be in a situation like that. If over a decade, it's just, there's a discomfort there, PTSD, I would
no,
imagine.
no, I don't know. I never been diagnosed. I've never gone to a doctor about it. Nor do I really want to go to a doctor about it. But that said, I just live with it,
Social anxiety, yeah. No, and it can be a common thing. Stems from fear. Stems from fear, social anxiety. So, but anyway, so what you said Mark Wahlberg had met up with you, went for a drive, but
So he wanted to know my story because he knew I was the youngest guy involved that didn't become a rat, and he loved the story, and he liked the story. So I end up eventually meeting up with Mark, and we got to know each other, and he kind of took me under his wing. I worked with him on the movie, the set of The Departed. He hooked me up in Los Angeles with agency to get my book done, which became a New York Times bestseller. Thank God. And
congratulations.
And thank you. And my life changed after that. Now I showed a new purpose in life. I showed a new skill in life where I became an author. And yes, I had help in writing it, but in all truth, I was able to, this doesn't just come from an author, from somebody writing. I mean, this came from me, and I accomplished
You put it into
something.
the words and they put it to the paper.
Yeah, pretty much. And, they did the structural part of it because I never written a book before.
Sure.
So they were able to help out the structural part of it and some of the poetic part of it, if you will, which was beautiful. And but it's just they're my words, and yeah, we end up doing pretty well.
Take the opportunity to say that if you're listening on Fireside, there's a clickable link to Red's book on Amazon. You can purchase the book, even just purchase to support. You've heard a little bit of the story. Imagine what entails inside the book as one thing. But if you're listening on other platforms such as YouTube or any of the other streamed platforms, the link will be clickable as well in the bio a few hours after this show. So we'll put that up there so we can drive some traffic to the book and show some support. Now, you said your life's changed to be quite positive from there. What's been happening for you, and what plans do you have for the future?
So hopefully we can make something really work well with Rat Bastards, because it's such a unique story. It's not just a regular mob story, if you will. It's more than that, and especially where in this day and age, you're not talking about a guy who was a rat. Most of these guys who write books and all that, they've already been informants and stuff like that. But that said, so that's the unique part of it, and especially being at such a young age and the youngest guy involved at the time, and not being that weak link like they were. So there's a little bit of a catch there, if you will.
Sure. I want to ask you as well along the way, like who specifically you named the book after, Rat Bastard, because you've got stories like people, Sammy the Bull, who's come out and he's doing his podcast, and he obviously flipped for the feds to, sort of, people say save his skin from Gotti throwing him under the bus, though, because you talked about him on the tapes, and you've got people that will say that Michael Franzese cooperated in some sort of way but didn't get anyone in trouble. I'm not exactly sure of the story there, but when you call the book Rat Bastards, is it about rats in general that have turned, or is it
No,
about someone in specific?
it's about specifically the guys that were involved in the life that I was involved in.
Okay.
But that's a whole different other story with all those other people and Simitable and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, I think I told you I have friends that I know that are family members from the family that he was associated with, and they're still doing time, and maybe they'll never see the day of light. But this guy, he did what he did. He is doing what he's done, and I had people talk bad about me in tapes and stuff like that I was unaware of, and I wasn't aware that they actually felt that way, if you will. But that didn't make me change it didn't make me change my mind and being the man that I should be and accept the responsibility I needed to do. And that's the bottom line. So anyone who, in my book, because I had already faced that in my book and myself and being who I am, when I hear something like that, I just see that as an excuse to do what they really wanted to do anyway.
Sure. Red, I think we're going to start to wrap the podcast up here. I want to just take the opportunity to say thank you, man. You've got quite a story. I know there's so much more to cover too, but we're just basic for this sort of time frame. But like you're great at telling the story, and you can absolutely tell that you're screaming with loyalty and integrity as well. The way that you tell the story, there is no bullshit about you at all. I can tell that you shoot straight from the hip with this. So thank you for sharing the story with our listeners. And we could talk again offline if maybe you want to organize to do something a little bit more regularly here with a few things that we talked about. Maybe that'd be fun.
100%. Yeah, it'd be awesome. And thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you to all the people that are listening, and God bless and all that good stuff. And
thank you very much. So where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page and stuff like that, or they can even get a hold of the book on Amazon and write a review, which would be awesome. And I have a lot of good reviews. Most of the reviews that you'll see, majority of them are good, but some of them aren't. And that's because of I know that the people that I took the truth about in the book, that they had a little campaign going on against me, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Which is okay. That's part of the game.
Part of the hype.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's the way it goes. And but the truth always comes out, and the truth always stands. And once as long as you're honest and straightforward, it's the best thing to be.
You can't have your success without the haters. That's for sure. We're certainly finding that out. We've got a couple of messages before we do tell this out. We've got Chuck that says hello. He's listening here on YouTube, and we've got Dave who's left a message here for you as well. Here we go.
Hey, Rock. What a great show again. Your guest, Mr. Shea. Man, intriguing conversation. Just to let you know, the book will be here tomorrow. So I wanted to thank you for sharing this story with us. And what an intriguing story it is, and can't wait to read more about it. And for anybody else in the audience trying to order the book off that link, that's the Australian link. So just you can still get it. Just go to Amazon. You can still get it there. Anyway, thanks, brother. Rock, thanks for the show. And Mr. Shea, so nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Dave and Sam. Listen, Sam and Dave do a show, How Was Your Day, here on Fireside as well. I'm sure they're probably going to want to speak to you about being one of their guests on the show as well.
Sure.
It's a bit more of a fun, laughing, interactive show. But yeah, they're super supportive. So obviously they've bought your book there, which is great. And And to any of the other listeners, do that too. Support John by getting that book.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon in the UK. You can get it in the UK, Amazon. You can get it
Rat Bastards,
Australia, UK,
Amazon.
Australia. I mean, in United States, of course. It's worldwide. It's worldwide.
Absolutely. Okay, so just to tail off there, thank you to the listeners who have gotten involved and listened to this podcast. We are streaming this again on other platforms that'll be up shortly across all different podcast platforms. But if you don't mind even going to Apple Music and giving us a 5-star rating, give it 6 if it had it, but it's only got 5 stars. So yeah, give us a 5-star rating. Do the absolute same thing for John's book as well. Help push that out in the marketplace a little bit more. If you want to find myself a little bit more on any of the social media platforms, you can look at my link tree. It's linktree/Rocstedi. So you'll find me there. John, thank you so much. I'll give you a quick buzz after this on the phone, and I want to thank you personally for your time.
Thank you so much to all the listeners. God bless you and success and happiness in your life.
Thank you very much, guys. All the best. I'll bring up the weight bot and I'll drop us down. Here we go.